Shalom, everyone. In this video is to be a continuation of the previous video, which was astrology in the Bible. And in this video, we're going to go a little deeper into primeval astrology. And we're going to begin with a few foundational principles of primeval astrology in preparation for the video that will follow after this, which will go into more detail, which will go in more detail into primeval astrology. But I shall begin now with quoting Sefer Eyob, chapter 25, verse 5, where it is written, "The stars are not pure before him," which is the proof text that there are luminaries that are evil and are malefic, and there are luminaries that are beneficent. And we begin by listing the malefic planets as has been understood by all chief astrologers, going back all the way to antiquity, which would be Mars and Saturn. Mars being known in ancient mythologies as the god of war. Saturn has always been known throughout the entire world and in antiquity as being a very, very malefic deity. And then we begin with the malefic constellations. Now, I personally have a very hard time believing that the constellation of Aquarius is a malefic constellation, but it is the house of Saturn, and all chief astrologers place Saturn under the domicile of Aquarius. But in Ha-Kabbalah, Aquarius is known as the water bearer, which has an association and is equated with Shekhinah and Hamashiach. And so for me personally, it's very difficult to place Saturn in this constellation. And this may just be a profound error on the part of not just modern, but even ancient astrology. So we'll have to just take that with a grain of salt. However, the first real malefic constellation is Taurus, which is the bull, which represents the archetypal satanic archon, because in Ha-Kabbalah, this is exactly what the bull as a symbol represents, a satanic archon. This is why on Chag Sukkoth, the Feast of Sukkoth, or Tabernacles, we sacrifice a total of 70 bulls over the course of 70 days, representing the 70 satanic archons which rule over the Goyim. We then proceed to the constellation Capricorn, which is the goat, which is represented by Esau, because Esau's provenance was Har Sa'ir, which the word Sa'ir, or Mount Sa'ir, the Hebrew word Sa'ir comes from the Hebrew root word Sa'ir, which means goat. So Esau has an association and an equation with the goat, which in Ha-Kabbalah represents the archetypal demon, or Ha-Satan. And so this is because many of the attributes associated with Esau are malefic and satanic in nature. But a thorough mastery of Ha-Kabbalah will easily evince that the goat represents Ha-Satan, or the archetypal demon. And so this is why the constellation Capricorn is one of the most malefic constellations of all the constellations. Then we proceed to the constellation Libra, which represents the scales, which represent judgment. And so it's for this reason that it's considered a malefic constellation. Then we proceed to Aries, which is the domicile of the planet Mars. And Aries represents the ram, which represents the archetypal warlord. And so this is why it's considered a malefic constellation, because of its association with Mars, because it houses Mars. Yes. Then we proceed to the constellation of the serpent eagle. Now, in Ha-Kabbalah, there is a very telistic equation between the serpent and eagle, as is evinced through the Holy Word. But again, to give the full explanation and proofs of this would go beyond the scope of this video. But according to the ancient Chaldean and Hebrew astrological system, this constellation was known and called the serpent, or the eagle. And this, of course, is in modern astrology, this is Scorpio. And again, this is one of the most malefic constellations, right up there with Capricorn and even Libra. And now this is very important to understand because what's just presented here in the slide are what are considered some of the basics of primeval astrology. Now, we proceed now to talk a little bit about astrology in the Bible, because the Bible, on one encoded level, is, completely astrological. And if anyone had ever read Ibn Ezra's commentary on the Torah, Ibn Ezra was one of the chief Jewish magicians of the past 1500 years. And his commentary on the Torah is very much concerned with all of the esoteric astrological aspects that are encoded within HaTorah. And so basically, one of the most foundational and basic principles of HaKabbalah is that all knowledge and wisdom is contained and encoded within HaTorah. And this is, every highly initiated Kabbalist understands this, and you'll even find this statement in many ancient Kabbalistic treatises by some of the most preeminent Kabbalists. And so astrology is just one small subset of all knowledge and wisdom of the universe. But again, you would have to be extremely initiated into the Kabbalah and understand all of the keys to be able to extract all of the esoteric astrological knowledge and wisdom contained within the Holy Word. Nevertheless, here I provide a few tidbits. So the first principle to understand is that there are a total of 10 circles in the heavens, as is reflected by Hasfaroth. And these 10 circles are divided into two main circles, as is reflected by the binary aspect of Hasfaroth, which are male and female. As it is written, their work were like a wheel or a circle in the middle of a wheel. So here, this is, I forgot to put the citation here, but this is found in Sefer Yechezkel, chapter 1. I forget which verse, but essentially the point of this verse in the first chapter of Sefer Yechezkel is he's saying that their work, that is, that telestically their work is in reference to the heavens, is basically like a wheel in the middle of another wheel. And the big circular wheel represents the zodiac, as it is also written in Sefer Yechezkel chapter 1, verse 15, where it says, "Now I beheld the living creatures, or beasts, which are the zodiac. Behold, one wheel, which is the circle and zodiac, upon the earth by the living creatures, with his four faces," and these represent the cardinal directions or equinoctial segments, around the year. So, understand when he says, "Behold, one wheel upon the earth by the living creatures," you're supposed to imagine on an astrological level the wheel with all of the creatures on the wheel, which represent the zodiac. That's what he's really saying here on a very telistic, esoteric level. So we should then know from this verse that the creatures represent the signs of the zodiac, as it is also written, "They four had the face of Adam, the face of a lion, the face of an ox or bull, and the face of an eagle." Now, Adam here, there's only one complete man to be found in the zodiac, and that is the water bearer, which in modern times is known as Aquarius. So that's who Adam represents. He represents Aquarius. The face of a lion is obviously a reference to the constellation Leo, and the face of an ox or bull is an obvious reference to the constellation Taurus. And then the face of an eagle, as any ancient initiated Kabbalist would know, an eagle is equated with the serpent, and so this, of course, would be an obvious reference to Scorpio. So here he gives you the four cardinal constellations within the zodiac, which would be placed over the equinoctial segments, of the solar year. Now, the zodiac or big circle contains the revolutions of the luminaries, but the smaller circle would contain the revolutions of the planets, which move against the bigger wheel. And it is the big circle, which is the zodiac, which causes the precession of the equinoxes, because the zodiac is revolving, just as the smaller circle, which represents all of the revolutions of the planets, is also revolving. And so principally, Yechezkel is giving us the cardinal zodiac points at the beginning of creation, which would mean that at the moment of creation or thereafter, the vernal equinox was in 0 degrees Taurus, and the autumnal equinox would have been in 0 degrees Scorpio. The solstices would have occurred in the constellations Aquarius and Leo. During the generation of Moshe, what is significant is that, as is events by Torah, is that, or specifically in the book of Exodus, is that the vernal equinox has entered Aries, the constellation Aries or the Ram, all the way into Yeshua. And so this, of course, is proven in Flavius Josephus, book 3, line 248, where he says, in the month of Chanticus, which is by us called Nisan, and the beginning of our year, when the sun is on Aries. So the sun entered Aries during the generation of Moshe as they were leaving Egypt. And the sun continued to be in Aries for about 2,000 years, all the way into the generation of Flavius Josephus, when it was getting ready to enter the constellation Pisces. So due to the precession of the equinoxes, Nisan/Abib is now at the end of Pisces, about to enter Aquarius. Now, we now proceed to talk about the secret of Pesach, which namely is that the generation of Moshe occurred when the vernal equinox was just about to enter the constellation Aries, or the Ram, which it did all the way up, going up to Yeshua. And this is very important to understand because Pesach occurred on Abib 14, when the sun was in or around 0 degrees Aries. And it must be remembered that on Abib 14, which is Pesach, a lamb must be sacrificed. So Kabbalistically, this represents the negation of the astral influence of the constellations, in this case specifically Aries or the Ram, because it was at this point in time during the generation of Moshe that the constellation Aries or the Ram was at its apotheosis. Moreover, the Egyptians worshipped this constellation, as it is written in Sefer Shemot, chapter 8, verse 22, where it says, if we sacrifice that which the Egyptians worship, I mean, clear reference to the lambs that they were going to be sacrificing. And then we find in the ancient Midrashim, specifically Shemot Rabbah, in chapter 16, verse 2, it says, take you lambs and slaughter the gods of Egypt, because they worshipped the constellation Aries, which was the ram, and so they worshipped lambs. And so they considered lambs very holy and sacred, just like modern Indians consider cows very holy and sacred, so the Egyptians considered lambs very holy and sacred. And so slaughtering a lamb would be of great offense to the ancient Egyptians. And so, again, it is principally extremely momentous to understand that Kabbalistically, on a very esoteric Kabbalistic level, this ritual that is performed on Pesach is a holy ritual which negates the astral influences of the constellations over Yisrael, especially when these constellations are in their apotheosis. And it is for this reason, therefore, that it is written by our ancient sages in Talmud Bavli, Tractate Shabbat, folio 156a, that there is no mazal, or celestial flux, or astrological influence over Yisrael. Because when we keep the Torah and all of its mitzvot at an extremely high level, we negate all astral influences over us. And this is why it is extremely critical and momentous to observe HaTorah at a very, very high level. Because there are mysteries and there are secrets behind all of the mitzvot. Unfortunately, Christians are extremely stupid and ignorant and don't understand this. But we Yehudim, the older wise brother, know better. Now we proceed to discuss the sidereal versus the tropical astrological system, because there are two prevalent systems in modern astrology. One is modern, one is primeval. It is the sidereal system that is primeval and the tropical system that is modern. Now, the ancients knew about the precession of the equinoxes as is evinced by the ancient Greek astronomer Hipparchus, as they were the disciples of the most advanced race on earth, which was the Hebrew race, as it is written in our ancient divine oracles, where it says that Japheth would dwell in the tents of Shem, meaning that the Greeks would dwell in our tents and they would gain much of their knowledge, wisdom, and theosophies from us, the Hebrew race. And so it should be of no surprise that the astronomers had all this advanced astrological knowledge and wisdom, because they took it, they took it and learned it from the ancient Hebrews. And so if the ancient Greeks knew about the precession of the equinoxes, clearly so did the ancient Hebrews, who have always been the most astronomically and astrologically advanced race on planet Earth. And so all ancient astrological calendars and systems were sidereal. The modern Indians, as an example, continue to use their sidereal astrological system as preserved from their ancient ancestors. Because all true, um, you know, fully initiated astrologers, whether ancient or modern, all of them know that it is the sidereal system that is the most correct system because it takes into account the precession of the equinoxes. The tropical system does not. The tropical system fixes the vernal equinox at 0 degrees Aries every year. But there was only, well, you have to understand that, the vernal equinox was at 0 degrees Aries for about, 30, 30 years or less. And that was during the generation of Moshe. So by doing that, you're basically saying that the astrological conditions in the heavens have been the same as they were during the generation of Moshe throughout history. And that, of course, is complete utter stupidity and nonsense, right? This is just total stupidity and ignorance because this completely ignores the precession of the equinoxes. By fixing the vernal equinox at 0 degrees Aries every year, you are completely ignoring the precession of the equinoxes. So you're completely ignoring the actions and the movements of the luminaries in the heavens, which is exactly what astrology is all based on. And so, it is important to also understand that the constellations determine the long epochs or ages. They move 1 degree every 72 years according to the 72 divine archons. And so, it's going to take, about 2,000 years for, a constellation for the vernal equinox to move into a new constellation, right? And this is what determines the ages. So when Moshe, generation was entering 0 degrees Aries, over 2,000 years later, they then began to enter the age of Pisces when Yeshua came on the scene. And that started a whole new age. And now we are about 2,000 years later, we are now getting ready to move out of the age of Pisces and into the age of Aquarius, which is going to be the millennial reign, because the age of Aquarius is the water bearer, which symbolizes Mashiach and Shekhinah, who will be ruling over the earth. Right? He is the water bearer. He is the holy God that has the living waters. Holy, eternal living waters is what he will provide for us in the millennial reign, in signification with his constellation. And so, currently then, and this is what most modern pseudo-astrologers don't understand, is that on a true sidereal basis, we are currently around 29.5 degrees Pisces, literally about half a degree away, if not less, from entering, or 1 degree, maybe 1 degree, about 1 degree, half a degree, who knows? But we're this close. We're very close to entering the age of Aquarius, which is the millennial reign under the divine water bearer, who contains the living waters, who is Hamashiach. And so, this is because we are in the last generation, as it is written, for Adonai shall build Zion. This is written for the last generation, as we find in our ancient divine oracles, because Zion has only been rebuilt for the first time in over 2,000 years in this last generation. And this is how we know that we are in the last generation. And so with that said, then you should understand, if you can map the luminaries and read them, that we are extremely close, about 20 years or so from entering the age of Aquarius. And if you were fully initiated into astrology, you would, of course, know the exact date and time when the Yeshua was coming back and when the millennial reign begins. But this is extremely esoteric divine knowledge and wisdom that just cannot be shared in this video or other videos for that matter. Now we proceed to speak on mundane astrology, which is that the basic principle concerning mundane astrology is that time is determined by the revolution of the luminaries, as is explicitly stipulated in HaTorah. And so time is circular and cyclical, not linear. And so many goyim are very ignorant and have been brainwashed into perceiving and conceiving of time as being linear, when in fact it is circular and cyclical. And this is clearly evinced in HaTorah, where there are many cycles given in HaTorah. Whether you read about Abraham going into Egypt, and then his grandson Yaakov goes into Egypt, his seed Israel goes into Egypt, right? And there are just many, many exoteric and esoteric cycles given in the Torah. And when they are fully understood, then you begin to fully understand the nature and essence of the cyclicity of time. Now, the constellations and the planets and the luminaries are Elohim with a small e, as it is written, as I stated in the previous video, where in Sefer Bereshit, chapter 1, verse 17, it says, and he, that is, Ha-Elohim, set the Elohim in the firmament of the heavens, right? So it's very critical and important to understand that the luminaries are divine, as I have proven in the previous video. And so this is important to understand because since they are Elohim, then they are very powerful. And they are controlling events here on Earth, as I also proved in the previous video. And so one of the basic tenets of New Day astrology then is that major events here on Earth occur through the aspects of the highest planets and the moon. Because the moon is the lowest sphere, it has the greatest effect on the Earth. And so I now proceed to quote one of what are 2 or 3 or 4 of the most initiated astrologers of the past 2,000 years. One of them is a Persian Jewish Kabbalist and astrologer, highly initiated, who went by the name of Masha Allah Ben Athari. And in his book, In the Roots of the Revolutions, in chapter 8, he states, Masha Allah said that the conjunction of the planets signifies the accidents of the world and its matter, which are thus to be considered at the time of the conjunction of the higher and lower planets. Now, I will also go on to quote one of his contemporaries, who was also a very initiated Babylonian Jewish Kabbalist and astrologer, who goes by the name of Sal ben Bashir. In his book, The 50 Judgment, he writes, know that the significatrix, which is the moon, whose circle is closest to the earth than the circles of the planets, is similar to the things of the world more so than all the planets. Therefore, consider the moon as the significatrix of all matters. He also writes, the conjunction of the moon signifies what is going to be and what is hoped for concerning matters. And so this is why it is written in our most principal esoteric Kabbalistic text in Sefer HaZohar in Book 1, Folio 46b, it says, calculation of all is by the moon. So here's the site of all equinoxes, solstices, gematriot, which are mathematical calculations, intercalations, festivals, holidays, and Shabbats. Israel, cleaving to the Blessed Holy One, and calculate by the moon. And I just can't fully emphasize the implications and ramifications of this extremely Kabbalistic verse, namely that it is the moon which is the principal variable in our astrological calculations. Now, we end by listing out a few of the major defects of the moon, which would be considered evil aspects of the moon. And these can all be found in Sal ben Bashir's introduction, but they are also re-quoted and restated in other major Kabbalistic treatises like that of Ibn Ezra and other ones as well. But I think that the original source can be attributed to Sal ben Bashir, as indicated in his ancient writings. So the first evil aspect is that if the moon is joined to the malefics, or they aspect her from the square or opposition, then this is considered very evil. And if she is in the ignited fiery path, that is, if she is in the signs of Libra or Scorpio, because again, Libra and Scorpio are considered 2 of the most malefic constellations, then that's also considered evil. And if she is in the end of degrees of the signs, which are the bounds of the malefics over 90% of the time, then this, of course, is also considered very evil. And also, if she is eclipsed, which I think is just common sense, that most people understand as common sense that when a lunar eclipse happens, that it is usually more often than not it signifies an omen. And so these are some of the major defects or evil of the moon. Of course, there are others, but I listed what I thought to be considered the most major ones. Now, everything that I have elucidated in this video is just to give a general high-level overview of some of the basic principles of primeval astrology, because in the next video, we're going to go really deep and detailed into primeval astrology and how it can be used to predict the future. So with that said, shalom.